Hello, it's good to see you. Today we're going to take a look at this hardback book, and the title of the book is Plants for Small Spaces. It's by Stephanie Donaldson and Susan Berry, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just about ways to arrange plants when you don't have much space. So we're just going to open this up and we're going to take a look at several different sections of this book. It has beautiful pictures, as you can see. This is a lovely little garden here. Look at this. I love the brickwork down here. So I'm going to read the introduction to you. We have all used the phrase small is beautiful at one time or another, and this is certainly the effect we strive for when gardening in small spaces. By using the vertical as well as the horizontal surfaces, you can greatly increase the potential planting areas, and the addition of raised containers will allow vertical planting away from the boundaries. With gardening on this scale, every inch is precious, and good seasonal planting is needed to ensure there is color and interest throughout the year. Even the tiniest space needs drama, as well as good plantings, and the inclusion of a large pot with a striking plant, a column, or a statue will create a focal point to complete the design of your small but beautiful space. And you can see even in this picture we have a lot of different things. We have different types of flowers down here, and some in the middle. And back here we have an even greater variety of foliage in a very small area. Oh, that's beautiful. A little pathway there. The challenge of gardening in a small space lies in using limited area as effectively as possible to create the kind of garden that suits you and your lifestyle. All the ideas in this book are easily achievable, and there is no structural work involved beyond putting up a hook for a hanging basket, but there are lots of inspiring ideas to help you transform the garden you have into the garden you want. Plants for Small Spaces introduces you to the range of planting concepts that will help you get the most out of your garden by using all the surfaces available to you. Walls, windowsills, doorways, steps, corners, the terraced patio, or the balcony all can be adorned with plants that trail, climb, or spread from pots, troughs, and hanging baskets. Container planting is an essential element of gardening in a small space, and you will find plenty of inspiration for every shape and size of container, as well as practical advice on how to be a successful container gardener. The final section of this book, the Plant Finder, will help you to select suitable plants for the conditions in your garden. Plants that will perform well throughout the year, fill your garden with color, shape, and texture, and enable you to achieve the overall effect you desire. The great bonus of gardening in a small space is that it allows you time to experiment, to plan, and to sit and enjoy the fruits of your labor. Don't envy those with larger gardens. Time is a luxury they seldom enjoy. And down here we have a little description for this picture. Shade is no obstacle to planting small spaces. Busy Lizzie's in an antique wire container, hostas, little blue creeping campanulas, purple-leaved hirschera, and a host of other foliage plants are crammed together in a richly textured tapestry. And here's a nice little setting. The architectural beauty of topiary plants contrasts interestingly with the informal background. Oh my goodness, look at all these containers. So you have these multiple levels of pots. It's even one way up there. And here we have, it looks like a woven framework. And a vine is climbing up that. That's a very large pot, and we have pots of different sizes. And over here we have some pots as well. Handsome foliage plants make a welcome change from bright flowers and create a useful focal point. Planting in tiers using attractive terracotta and metal raised containers makes maximum use of available space and creates the illusion of a much larger garden. In general, there are two approaches to planting. There is the rational approach, in which the gardener allows the space to dictate the planting, and the acquisitive approach, embodied by the gardener who yearns to grow a particular plant and will find a way to fit it into the available space. The rational gardener enjoys formal gardening and appreciates controlled color schemes and symmetry, while the acquisitive gardener is more at home with the informal style of garden plants where color is riotous, plants climb or sprawl, and the design evolves more by happy accident than planning. You will find gardening more fulfilling if you decide at the start which approach most appeals to you. If you long for a miniature Versailles, love topiary, and prefer single color schemes, you are a rationalist who will enjoy planting your garden on paper and will have the patience to train plants. If, on the other hand, you love impulse buying and like to experiment, then you are an acquisitive gardener who will enjoy an informal garden. Once you have decided which category suits you, you will have some guidelines to work within. For example, vertical planting in the formal garden should be largely evergreen with flowering plants as accent color, while the informal garden benefits from a colorful succession of flowers. And this section discusses vertical planting of these beautiful flowers. This is clematis. The vagabond twines with the star jasmine. That's just beautiful. Look at I love the beautiful yellow and the purple together. And over here, on the left, a black painted fence with horizontal wires supports the backdrop for a lush summer display of pink New Dawn roses and mauve clematis, Prince Charles. Up here, this is honeysuckle, the yellow part. This planting of honeysuckle and potato vine in contrasting yellows and purples ensures a long-lasting display. And this section discusses focal points. Look at this. That's just so pretty. And these are in the shade, as you can kind of see. And here we have a little statue. It's a little, here's the same statue, just separated. Focal points. Whether you know it or not, your garden already has a focal point, the point to which the eye naturally travels when entering or viewing the garden. If you are lucky, this will be something attractive, possibly a tree, an architectural plant, or a statue. Yet, unattractive features can draw the eye just as powerfully and may need to be removed, disguised, or supplanted by a different, more attractive focal point before the full potential of the garden can be realized. Depending on the size and shape of your garden, you may have more than one focal point. Generally speaking, any clearly defined area should have a single focal point, and this is determined by looking at the area from the most used viewpoint. Attempting to create other focal points from different viewpoints can result in a rather muddled, overdone effect. It doesn't matter that viewing the focal point from different aspects may not reveal it in its full glory. This adds an element of mystery to the garden and encourages the observer to explore it even more. Some of the most successful gardens rely on this type of effect. If the view beyond your boundaries is worth looking at, you can add distance and perspective to your focal point by raising it and framing it against a backdrop of the view beyond. For example, you can place a statue or an urn on a plinth rather than leave it at ground level. This immediately gives the object increased visual importance. Alternatively, you can plant a group of taller, flowering shrubs behind the statue or urn to draw the eye up. Conversely, if the view over the fence leaves a lot to be desired, then the focal point should be at a low level to encourage the eye away from the offending blot on the landscape. A pond or other water feature is particularly effective, especially if it includes some running water, which is usually an irresistible draw. This adds another dimension to your garden and creates a very tranquil effect that is particularly refreshing in the hot summer months. In many small spaces, one of the most important functions of a focal point is to add height to what can sometimes be a rather flat plane. This can be done by creating a point of interest on a wall, by playing with scale and inducing a large architectural feature, or including a large architectural feature, or through the use of topiary. At nighttime, some well-positioned lighting will add extra drama to the scene. In a garden with no obvious focal point, you can locate the most effective position by placing a fairly tall object, such as a stepladder, at various points around the garden until you find the position that has the most interesting effect on the shape and perspective of the garden. This will be your focal point. Over here at this picture, the base of a tree forms the focal point for a statue and a mixed summer planting of petunias, marguerites, agapanthus, and helichrysum. All these plants are in containers that can be removed when the flowering display is over. This way, you can create different plantings for each season. And here we have a thing that's been constructed for something to climb. Be sure to position your sweet peas where you can best enjoy their beauty and fragrance. A sunny, sheltered corner where you like to sit is ideal, or next to a path or French windows where the scent will stop you in your tracks. Wigwam for climbers. Tall, growing, colorful plants are an important element in a small garden because they provide height. Wall plants such as roses, clematis, and honeysuckle will form the backdrop, but you can enjoy wonderful additional color with climbing annuals such as sweet peas, nasturtiums, morning glories, and even runner beans planted in large pots and encouraged to climb twiggy sticks. How to grow sweet peas in a pot. You can use ordinary 5-foot garden canes to support sweet peas grown in a pot, but twiggy sticks will look more decorative and the sweet peas will be able to climb through them with the aid of plant rings. A 16-inch pot is roomy enough for 10 to 12 plants spaced evenly around the edge of the pot. Sweet peas grow well from seed. The seeds are large and easy to handle. Plant them in a 6-inch diameter pot about a ½ inch deep and about a ½ inch apart. Put the pot in good light and keep moist. When they are about 3 inches tall, they can be transplanted to the larger pot and supported with canes or sticks. Step number 1. Take a large pot and cover the base with broken shards of pot to create a drainage layer before partially filling with potting soil. Step number 2. Fill the pot with a mixture of potting soil and composted humus. Plant the sweet pea seedlings around the pot edge. Number 3. Firmly push the twigs or canes into position between the evenly spaced sweet pea plants. And step number 4. Tie the twigs or canes together to form a wigwam. Canes will only need tying at the top, whereas twigs may need more restraint. Oh, that's so beautiful. Look at that. I love that. Let's see. The That's just so pretty, the window box. I love all the variety and the colors there. Seasonal displays. Gardening in small spaces is at its best when there is a succession of plantings throughout the year. They do not need to be elaborate or expensive. 2 or 3 containers filled with plants in their prime are all that is needed to transform a rather gloomy winter garden. Similarly, a group of pots planted with miniature bulbs placed on a wall or table will entice you out into the early spring sunshine to admire their beauty and fragrance. The garden, patio, or balcony can, if you choose, undergo a transformation each season. Although impulse buying when plants are flowering is not generally recommended during this summer when the result is often very short-lived plants, buying plants this way during the cooler months allows you to assemble instant displays that will last well. At the same time, a little planning can ensure color throughout the year. Bulbs planted under herbaceous plants in the fall will provide fresh color in the spring when the herbaceous plants are starting to send out green shoots. During the summer and fall months, colorful annuals and half-hardy perennials will provide strong color in containers and fill any gaps in the borders. Evergreen and fruiting or berried shrubs and climbers will give color and structure to the garden throughout the fall and winter. You can have some containers that you earmark for changing displays, replanting them each season. This is almost always the case with window boxes, since if this is your entire gardening space, you cannot simply move the containers to a more out-of-the-way spot when the plants are past their best. Such a scheme could involve cyclamens, heathers, and winter flowering pansies in the colder months, small scillas, primulas, and dwarf narcissi in the spring, verbena or helichrysum with trailing dioecious and geraniums in the summer, and chrysanthemums and pernatia and small foliage plants in the fall. With the terraced patio or small backyard at your disposal, you can have more permanent seasonal displays, simply moving containers into the foreground or background as the state of their planting dictates. These are pretty. I have some of these in some pots at my house right now, just like these. And they have held up remarkably well. I can't believe they're still alive. I thought they would have died by now, but they're doing great. Oh my goodness, look at that pop of color. That's just gorgeous. Forms of container. When gardening in a small space, the container is king. It gives the garden flexibility and allows for transformations that would not be possible if all planting was in the soil. Each container is in effect a miniature garden with its own soil conditions, climate, and aspect, all of which you can control. Whether positioned singly or grouped to create layers of plantings, containers make up the furniture of the garden, without which the space can look bare and incomplete. Decorated clay and wooden pots and a rustic wooden basket all help to create variety and interest in small space gardening. Oh, that's lovely. The days when container gardening meant choosing between a clay and a plastic flower pot are gone. Even the most basic garden center now has a good range of competitively priced pots, troughs, and planters to choose from, while specialist craftspeople and importers will supply you with anything from amazingly authentic-looking fiberglass copies of antique lead troughs and terracotta urns to richly glazed Vietnamese and Provençal pots. Many of these containers are so decorative that there is a risk of overdoing the effect when using them. Generally, you should aim for a simple architectural effect rather than a glorious profusion. Many imported terracotta pots are inexpensive and very decorative, but not frost-proof. They can be used for summer plants, but must be brought indoors for the winter. In cold areas, it is best to buy terracotta that has been fired at very high temperatures to withstand frost damage. If you use saucers under pots in summer, it is vital to remove them in late fall because even the toughest pot will crack if left standing in frozen water. Lining decorative pots with slightly smaller plastic pots avoids having to discard spring flowers that are still looking good to get the summer plants established. Reclamation yards are excellent sources for unusual containers, especially when you are looking for something fairly large as a focal point. They are also good places to find plinths, columns, and other architectural items. Look for smaller containers in junk stores and flea markets. An old tin bath with a hole in it is useless for its original purpose, but can look great when planted with spring bulbs. And a metal bottle carrier will hold pots of flowering plants just as easily as bottles. Oh, look at that. Planting a summer pot. This impressive container makes a very dramatic statement among the surrounding greenery. The plants used are these, and I don't know how to pronounce these: Melianthus major, Helichrysum microphyllum, Pelargonium voodoo, Salvia, Raspberry royale, Argyranthemum flamingo, and all that is mixed together in this beautiful pot. That's just gorgeous. And see how it kind of spills down like that? Very pretty. Classic containers. A lushly planted classic urn is all that is needed to give a small space both drama and elegance. Whether set against a backdrop or of unadorned brick or stone, or backed by a mass of climbing plants, its outline will furnish its surroundings and draw the eye. It adds instant height and structure to a garden and a sense of the theatrical. Planting a grand urn. Grand containers deserve to be filled with equally grand plants. An exuberant datura spills out of this container and towers above all the other plants in the border. The rounded shape created by the various leaves and flowers is the perfect contrast to the urn in which they are planted. The plants used for this display are shown below: Datura, Helichrysum, Salvia patens, Cambridge, and Verbena. Some containers are very much secondary to the plants that grow in them, but this should not be the case when using classic containers such as stone urns. These are beautiful objects on their own and can even be used unplanted as sculptures during the winter. In the spring, densely planted with tulips, an urn is a dramatic focal point, while luxuriant summer plants will soften its outline but still make sure that it is the center of attention. To be best admired, the urn should be placed at eye level on a ledge or a plinth. At ground level, its outline is too easily lost amid its surroundings. The planting can take the form of eye-catching feature plants, foliage plants, or a mixture of trailing plants that drape attractively over the rim of the container. Make sure the planting colors and textures complement the style of the pot. When planting the urn for summer, choose a central plant that has enough drama of its own not to be overwhelmed by its container. It should grow to the same height as that of the urn and spread well over its sides, although more upright plants can be used in combination with trailing plants that provide width. It is essential to water the urns daily and to fertilize and deadhead the plants regularly. A compelling visual statement such as a classic urn will inevitably be a prominent focal point, and neglect will be very noticeable. Oh, that's interesting. These are drawers. We have plants in drawers. I don't think I like it. That's a little weird. Unusual containers. The adventurous gardener may find the choice of pots available at most garden centers rather ordinary, while the more unusual, commercially available alternatives are frequently very expensive. There are, however, plenty of wonderful containers to be found in thrift shops, reclamation yards, and even in your own attic. Gardening is, after all, an expression of each individual's creativity, and this does not need to be limited to your choice of plants. Quirky containers are fun, eye-catching, and original. Oh, this is cute. This is one in a little wheelbarrow. I do like that. And these are nice. These are in a basket. That's cool. When we buy new containers for the garden, we expect them to be in perfect condition and to prove durable. This does not need to be the case with unusual containers, which are frequently objects that have been discarded because they no longer fulfill their original function. They may last only 2 or 3 seasons before they finally collapse, but in the meantime you will have had the pleasure of an inexpensive container, and you can enjoy a more creative form of recycling than a visit to the waste management center. A woven basket that has lost its handle is useless for carrying things, but it is charming as a moss-lined container for alpine strawberries or pinks. An old black saucepan, rusted through at the bottom, is an appropriate container for otherwise invasive mint when placed next to the kitchen door, and a wooden wheelbarrow, discarded because its wheel wobbles and it can hardly be lifted, becomes a decorative planter. Just because you have never seen something used as a container before does not mean it can't do the job. Provided you create some drainage holes and there is room for a sufficient depth of soil, practically anything can become a planter. However, keep in mind that unusual does not have to mean tacky. Old car tires and bedpans or disused toilets work as containers, but they seldom look decorative. So keep your aesthetic sensibilities about you when searching for something new. I guess that's cool. Down here you can see that they have this drawer is open, and then this drawer is missing, and this one is open. I don't know, to me this just looks a little bit junky. I don't think I like it. Now this I like. This is cool. This is nice. Up here, the shimmering leaves of Helichrysum petiolari catch the light. A bowl of succulents on top of a stone column makes a bold statement. Large containers of architectural plants stand out dramatically from the surrounding greenery, as with the variegated-leaved hosta up here and the fern. It's a very large fern right here. It's really nice. I love it. They have these large wooden containers. Those are pretty. When strikingly planted, one grand, large-scale container can form the centerpiece of a small space and inspire the rest of the planting. It can even be the only significant planting in an area that otherwise consists of varied textures of hard landscaping, such as stone, brick, or paving, that will become softened in time by moss and creeping plants. Raising the container above the level of the surrounding planting will often increase the impact. That is quite striking. Problem corners or difficult spaces can become a positive asset in the small garden when plants and containers are imaginatively combined. Allow yourself to be inspired by other people's bright ideas and keep a notebook handy to record particularly good plant combinations or inspired marriages of plants and containers. Planting schemes from famous gardens can be scaled down effectively. Even the smallest space can take one large dramatic plant. This generally works best when the plant has architectural or textured foliage or flowers. Hostas, ferns, cordylines, and New Zealand flax all have handsome foliage. Lilies, angels, trumpets, and peonies have glorious flowers, and the globe artichoke has serrated silver gray foliage and magnificent purple thistle-like flowers. Oh, now that's nice. I like the little seashell accents. They're kind of the same color as the flowers. That's very pretty. That's an interesting idea. Oh, I like that too. That's lovely. This is going to be the last section that we read. Filled with summer flowering gazanias and portulacas, the styrofoam trough has been painted terracotta, successfully disguising its more humble origins. I would never have guessed that was styrofoam. Adding a few little treasures such as these shells increases the decorative effect. Troughs are often the ideal planters for narrow spaces, including windowsills and balconies. An attractive view can be framed with colorful low-growing plants, while a less decorative outlook can be masked by more abundant foliage and flowers. When selecting your plants, choose some that are fragrant so their scent will waft through an open door or window. Troughs come in many forms, including wood, stone, pottery, and metal. Choose colors and textures of container that are appropriate for the setting. If your budget will not extend to expensive containers, why not consider recycling household containers instead? The most interesting gardens often feature containers that have been adapted from their original purpose. While many of these containers have previously been used as the manufacturers intended, it is also possible to buy them new and to use them in the garden from the start. Styrofoam troughs, like those used for wallpapering, are one example. They are inexpensive and available from decorating stores, easy to paint, and have the added benefit of being very lightweight, making them ideal for room gardens and balconies where weight can be a serious consideration. Most of the manufacturers of these troughs have realized that they have an alternative use in the garden, so have marked the base of the trough to show where drainage holes should be made. Although lacking the inherent strength of most containers, Styrofoam is actually a very plant-friendly material because it absorbs and retains warmth from the sun and therefore stimulates good root growth. And here they show you the steps to prepare a Styrofoam trough. Step number 1. Turn the trough upside down and use a hammer and screwdriver to pierce the drainage holes following the manufacturer's markings. If there are no markings, make 8 holes in 2 parallel lines along the base. Step number 2. Place the trough on a protected work surface and paint the sides and the base. Allow to dry, then paint the rim and the inside to below soil level. You can use latex paint, but red oxide paint gives a more durable finish. And that is just a little bit from the book, Plants for Small Spaces. Thank you so much for coming to listen and learn a little bit more about planting in small spaces. I hope to see you again really soon.